Danny Cole sat alone in the pilot chair of his old cargo ship, the Dusty Horizon. The stars outside his window stretched endlessly in every direction. He had been flying through this empty region of space for 3 days now, carrying medical supplies to a human colony on the edge of known territory. It was quiet work. It was lonely work, but Danny preferred it that way. He was 34 years old with tired eyes and rough hands. 5 years ago, he had been a search and rescue pilot in the human fleet. He had been good at his job. He had saved dozens of lives during his service. But then came the mission that changed everything. A distress call from a mining station. His team flew in without proper backup. The station exploded before they could get everyone out. Danny survived. His entire crew did not. After that day, Danny left the military. He bought this old freighter with his savings and started hauling cargo between stations. He kept to himself. He did not make friends. He sent most of his earnings to the families of the crew members who died under his command. It would never be enough to repay what they lost, but it was all he could do. The ship's console suddenly beeped. Danny leaned forward and looked at the screen. A faint signal was coming through. He adjusted the sensors and listened carefully. It was a distress beacon. The signal was weak and broken, but it was definitely a call for help. The language was. Danny frowned. There were a powerful alien species that controlled a vast empire on the other side of this region. They were known for their strict social hierarchy and their general distrust of humans. They considered humans to be primitive and chaotic. Most would rather die than accept help from a human. He checked the coordinates. The signal was coming from an asteroid field about 2 hours away. It was a dangerous area. Pirates often hid among the rocks, waiting for easy targets. Any smart pilot would ignore the signal and keep flying. Danny stared at the blinking light on his console. He thought about his old crew. He thought about the people he could not save. His hands moved to the navigation controls almost on their own. The Dusty Horizon changed course and flew toward the asteroid field. 2 hours later, Danny guided his ship carefully through the spinning rocks. His old rescue equipment was still installed in the cargo bay. He had never removed it. Some part of him had always known he would need it again someday. The distress beacon led him to a small shuttle drifting between 2 massive asteroids. The ship was badly damaged. Scorch marks covered its hull. One of its engines was completely gone. Danny scanned the shuttle and found one life sign inside. The passenger was alive, but barely. He maneuvered his ship alongside the shuttle and extended the docking bridge. The air inside the shuttle was thin and cold. Emergency lights flickered red in the darkness. Danny moved quickly through the small vessel until he found the passenger. She was a female, unconscious on the floor. Her skin was pale blue, and her silver hair was matted with dried blood from a wound on her head. She wore simple gray clothing with no markings or symbols. Among the clothing indicated status. Gray meant she was either very low in their hierarchy or she was hiding her true position. Danny did not care about any of that. He lifted her carefully and carried her back to his ship. He placed her on the medical bed in his small cabin and began treating her injuries. The wound on her head was not serious, but she had been exposed to the cold for too long. He wrapped her in thermal blankets and monitored her vital signs. An hour passed, then 2. Danny sat in his pilot chair, watching the sensors for any sign of trouble. He should leave this area immediately. The asteroid field was too dangerous to stay in for long, but he wanted to make sure his passenger was stable before he risked any fast maneuvers. The female made a soft sound. Danny walked back to the cabin and found her eyes open. They were deep purple, and they looked at him with confusion and fear. She spoke in, her voice weak and rasping. Danny understood a little of the language from his military days. She was asking where she was, who he was, what happened. He answered in simple, telling her she was safe. He had found her shuttle and brought her aboard his ship. He was human, but he meant her no harm. Her eyes widened when she heard he was human. She tried to sit up but fell back from weakness. Danny gently pushed her shoulder down and told her to rest. She was too injured to move. The console in the cockpit started beeping urgently. Danny rushed to check it and felt his stomach drop. 3 ships had just appeared on his sensors. They were coming fast from behind the largest asteroid. Their signatures were familiar to anyone who traveled these shipping lanes. Slavers. They were a brutal species that captured beings from across the galaxy and sold them as slaves. They had no laws and no mercy. They attacked anyone who could not fight back. Danny looked at the 3 ships closing in on his position. His old freighter had a few weapons, but nothing that could stand against 3 vessels. Running was his only option, but the asteroid field was dense, and his ship was slow with the extra weight of the rescued. He made his decision in an instant. Danny sat down in the pilot chair and fired up the engines. The dusty horizon lurched forward, diving deeper into the asteroid field. Behind him, the ships accelerated to follow. The female appeared in the doorway of the cockpit, holding the wall for support. Her purple eyes were wide as she looked at the sensor display. She asked what was happening. Danny told her to hold on to something. Then he pushed the engines harder and flew straight toward a spinning cluster of massive rocks. The chase had begun. The dusty horizon shook violently as Danny flew through the asteroid field at dangerous speed. Rocks tumbled past the windows, some missing the hull by only a few meters. Behind them, the 3 ships followed with hungry determination. Danny's hands moved across the controls with practiced skill. He had flown through worse conditions during his rescue days. The key was to stay calm and think 3 moves ahead. Panic would kill him faster than any pirate. The female had strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. Her face was pale, and her injured body trembled from the effort of staying upright. But her purple eyes watched everything Danny did with sharp attention. She asked him why they were chasing them. Danny said he did not know. Maybe they had been tracking her shuttle before he arrived. Maybe they just saw an easy target. It did not matter now. All that mattered was escaping. The lead ship fired its weapons. Green energy bolts streaked past the dusty horizon and exploded against a nearby asteroid. Danny pulled hard on the controls and dove beneath a massive spinning rock. The ship tried to follow but had to pull up to avoid collision. The female said something in her own language. Danny caught the word for impossible. He allowed himself a small smile. Humans were full of impossible things. He spotted his chance ahead. A dense cluster of debris was slowly rotating at the center of the field. The gaps between the rocks were narrow and constantly changing. A large ship would never make it through. His old freighter was just small enough. Danny warned his passenger to hold tight. Then he flew directly into the cluster. The next 30 seconds were the longest of his life. Rocks scraped against the hull with terrible screeching sounds. The ship twisted and rolled through gaps that seemed to close the moment they passed through. Warning lights flashed across every console. The engines screamed from the strain. Then suddenly, they were through. Open space stretched before them on the other side of the cluster. Danny checked the sensors. 2 of the ships had fallen back, unable to follow through the debris. But the 3rd ship, the smallest one, had tried to chase them. Its wreckage now floated among the rocks, destroyed by a collision it could not avoid. The remaining 2 ships would have to go around the cluster. That would take time. Danny pushed the engines to maximum and flew toward the edge of the asteroid field. The female stared at him with an expression he could not read. She asked how he had done that. Danny said it was just flying. She said no pilot could have survived that maneuver. He shrugged and said humans were stubborn. They cleared the asteroid field and entered open space. Danny set a course for the nearest human colony and engaged the autopilot. His hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. He gripped them together to make them stop. His passenger noticed. She asked if he was afraid. Danny admitted that he was terrified the whole time. She seemed confused by this answer. She asked why he had risked so much if he was afraid. He said fear did not mean he should ignore someone who needed help. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she told him her name was. Danny introduced himself. She repeated his name slowly, as if testing how it sounded. Then she asked why he had saved her. Danny thought about the question. He told her about the distress signal. He said he heard someone calling for help, so he went to help. That was all. Shook her head. Among her people, nothing was that simple. Every action had a purpose. Every kindness expected something in return. Status determined who deserved help and who did not. A stranger with no connection to her would never risk their life without expecting payment. Danny said humans were different, or at least, some humans tried to be. He had not always succeeded at being the person he wanted to be, but ignoring someone in trouble was not something he could live with. Fell silent again. She looked around the small cockpit at the worn controls and patched panels. She asked how long he had been flying alone. Danny said 5 years. She asked if he had family waiting for him somewhere. He said no. She did not ask more questions. Danny appreciated that. The journey to the human colony would take 2 days at their current speed. Danny showed to the small cabin where she had woken up. He apologized for the poor conditions. The bed was narrow and the room was cold. It was all he had. Said it was more than she expected from a cargo ship. Danny noticed she did not say what she had expected. He left her to rest and went back to the cockpit. That night Danny could not sleep. He sat in the pilot chair and watched the stars pass by. His thoughts kept returning to the ships. Why had they been waiting in that asteroid field? Had they known about shuttle? Were they specifically hunting her? He thought about her simple gray clothing. Of low status, did not travel alone in diplomatic shuttles. They did not attract the attention of slavers. Something about her story did not fit together. But Danny did not ask. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had parts of their past they did not want to share. He understood that better than most. The next morning joined him in the cockpit. Her injuries were healing faster than he expected. Biology was different from human biology in many ways. She watched him eat a simple breakfast of protein bars and recycled water. She asked if this was what he ate every day. Danny nodded. Good food was expensive, and he sent most of his money elsewhere. Asked where his money went. Danny hesitated. Then he told her about his old crew, about the mission that killed them, about the families he had been sending money to ever since. He did not know why he told her. Maybe he was just tired of carrying the weight alone. Listened without interruption. When he finished, she said something that surprised him. She said the debt he felt was not something money could repay, but the fact that he kept trying meant something. It meant he remembered them. It meant their lives still mattered to someone. Danny had never thought about it that way. He nodded slowly and looked out at the stars. Somewhere behind them, 2 ships were still searching, and somewhere ahead, more danger was waiting. But for now, in this small moment of quiet, Danny felt something he had not felt in years. He felt like he was not completely alone. The long-range sensors detected them first. Danny leaned forward in his chair and studied the readings with growing concern. A group of large ships had appeared at the edge of sensor range. They were moving in a search pattern, sweeping the area systematically. The ship signatures were military, a full with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Danny had never seen so many warships in one place outside of a war zone. Had been sitting quietly in the co-pilot seat. When she saw the sensor display, her face went pale. She stood up quickly and stepped back from the console. Danny looked at her with new questions forming in his mind. He said the military was searching for something, or someone. He asked if she knew what they wanted. Did not answer immediately. Her purple eyes moved to the airlock controls. For a moment, Danny thought she might try to run, but there was nowhere to go in the emptiness of space. She finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She said that was searching for her. Danny waited for her to explain, took a deep breath and began to tell him the truth. She was not a low-status functionary. She was not a simple traveler. Her full name was, and she was the third daughter of the High Empress. She was royalty of the highest order. Her blood carried the authority of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. Danny sat very still as he processed this information. He asked why a princess of the empire was fleeing in a damaged shuttle with no guards or servants. Explained everything. Her mother, the Empress, had arranged a political marriage, was to become the wife of a warlord named. The marriage would secure a trade agreement between the two empires. It would prevent economic conflict. It would bring stability to the border regions. But was a monster. He had been married twice before. Both of his previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances. Everyone knew he had killed them, but no one could prove it and no one with power cared enough to try. Had begged her mother to cancel the arrangement. The Empress refused. One daughter was a small price for imperial stability, was expected to sacrifice herself for the good of her people. So she ran. She had bribed a shuttle pilot to help her escape. They had almost made it to neutral space when ships intercepted them. The pilot was killed in the attack, had barely managed to send the distress signal before she lost consciousness. Danny listened to the entire story without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one simple question. He asked what she wanted to do now. Seemed surprised by the question. She said she did not understand. Danny explained. He said she could signal thee and return to her people. She could go back to her life as a princess. He would not stop her. Or she could continue to the human colony. She could request asylum there. The Empire had no authority in human space. She would be safe from the marriage arrangement. He said the choice was hers. He was just the pilot. Stared at him for a long moment. She said no one had ever asked what she wanted before. Her entire life had been decided by others. Her education, her duties, her future. Everything had been chosen for her based on what was best for the Empire. Danny said that sounded like a terrible way to live, almost laughed. She said it was the only way she knew. They sat in silence as the continued its search pattern in the distance. Danny adjusted their course slightly to avoid detection. The human colony was still a full day away. To pass the time, Danny taught how to play a simple card game. He had a worn deck that he kept in his cabin for long trips. The game was called poker. It involved bluffing and reading your opponent and taking calculated risks. Was terrible at it. Her face showed every emotion. She could not hide when she had good cards or bad cards. Danny won every hand without effort. But she kept playing. She said she wanted to understand how humans thought. The game was confusing to her. Showing weakness was dangerous. Revealing your true feelings could destroy you. But in poker, the goal was to pretend. The goal was to make others believe something that was not true. Danny said the game was about more than lying. It was about understanding people. It was about knowing when someone was scared or confident or desperate. Good players did not just hide their own feelings. They learned to read others. Asked if he could read her, Danny said she was afraid. She was also relieved. And somewhere underneath all of that, she was angry. Angry at her mother. Angry at the empire that treated her as a bargaining chip. Angry at herself for not running sooner. Put down her cards. She asked how he knew all of that. Danny said it was not difficult. He had felt the same things himself after his crew died. Fear and relief and anger had been his constant companions for years. She asked if the feelings ever went away. Danny said they got quieter, but they never disappeared completely. The trick was learning to live with them. The ship's console suddenly screamed with warning alerts. Danny jumped to the controls and checked the sensors. His blood went cold. A hunting party had found them. 4 ships were approaching at attack speed. They had been hiding behind a small moon, waiting for their prey to pass by. and the lead ship was broadcasting a message. The voice that came through the speakers was deep and cruel. It identified itself as belonging to Warlord himself. He demanded the immediate return of his bride. He called her the Royal Bride. Danny looked at. She looked back at him with terror in her eyes. They had known who she was from the beginning. The attack on her shuttle had not been random. It had been a hunting expedition. And now the hunter had found his prey again. Warlord's voice filled the cockpit with cold amusement. He said he was impressed that a single human freighter had escaped his hunters in the asteroid field. He said humans were usually such easy prey. Perhaps this one would provide some entertainment before the end. Danny kept his hands steady on the controls. 4 ships surrounded them now. Each one was faster and better armed than the dusty horizon. Running was not an option. Fighting was suicide. Made his offer. He said the human pilot could live if he surrendered the princess immediately. More than that, would pay him generously. Enough credits to buy a new ship. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life. All he had to do was hand over 1 female. Danny looked at. She was standing behind his chair, her face a mask of despair. She had accepted her fate. She believed this was the end. She told Danny to take the offer. She said her life was not worth his death. She had known from the beginning that escape was impossible. They always caught their prey eventually. Danny turned back to the communication console. He opened a channel to ship. The warlord waited eagerly for the human's surrender. Danny said no. There was a long pause, asked if he had misunderstood. Danny repeated himself. He said he was not giving to anyone. She had asked him for help. He had given his word. That was the end of the discussion. Laughed. It was an ugly sound, full of contempt. He asked what a human's word was worth. He said humans were weak creatures who abandoned each other at the first sign of danger. Their promises meant nothing. Danny did not argue. He simply closed the communication channel. Grabbed his arm. She demanded to know what he was doing. He could not fight 4 warships. He could not outrun them. He was throwing his life away for nothing. Danny was already working at the controls. He said he had an idea. It was a bad idea. It would probably get them both killed. But it was the only chance they had. He activated the ship's emergency beacon on every frequency available. The distress signal blasted out in all directions. Human channels, every open frequency in the sector. Then he broadcast a voice message. He identified himself as Danny Cole, a human cargo hauler. He said he had rescued a citizen from a damaged shuttle. He said slavers were attacking his ship in neutral space. He requested immediate assistance from any vessel in range. He did not mention that his passenger was a princess. That information belonged to not him. His response was immediate. His ships opened fire. Danny threw the dusty horizon into a desperate, evasive pattern. Energy bolts screamed past the hull. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. The old freighter groaned and shook under the assault. But Danny was not trying to escape. He was buying time. He flew directly toward the largest ship. The gunners on that vessel hesitated, confused by the suicidal maneuver. Danny used that moment of hesitation to swing around behind them, putting the big ship between himself and the others. The vessels could not fire without hitting their own flagship, screamed orders at his pilots. The ships began repositioning for a clear shot. Danny armed his weapons. The dusty horizon had 2 small plasma cannons. They were meant for shooting asteroids, not warships. Against armor, they would do almost no damage. He fired anyway. The plasma bolt struck flagship on the engine section. They did not penetrate the armor, but they left scorch marks. They announced that this human refused to die quietly. His voice came through the speakers again. The amusement was gone now. Only rage remained. He told his ships to destroy the freighter. He did not care about the bride anymore. He wanted the human dead. All four ships converged on Danny's position. He could not dodge forever. His ship was too slow, too old, too damaged from the earlier chase. Warning lights covered every console. The hull was starting to crack in a dozen places. Screamed at him to stop. She ran toward the airlock. She said she would surrender herself. She would not let him die for her. Danny hit the lockdown control. Every door on the ship sealed automatically. Pounded against the cockpit door, but it would not open. He told her through the intercom that some things mattered more than survival. He said she deserved a chance to live her own life. If he could give her that chance, his death would mean something. A missile struck the rear of the ship. The explosion threw Danny from his chair. Fire alarms screamed. The engines sputtered and died. The dusty horizon drifted helplessly in space. Ships closed in for the kill. Danny pulled himself back into the pilot chair. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. His left arm hung useless at his side, but his right hand found the thruster controls. He aimed his crippled ship directly at its flagship. If he was going to die, he would take the warlord with him. Then the sensors detected new contacts, dozens of them, appearing from faster-than-light travel all around them. They had arrived. Ships turned to face the new threat, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Weapons tore through the vessels with devastating precision. 2 ships exploded in seconds. A third tried to flee and was cut down before it could escape. His flagship was the last to fall. The warlord's final scream of rage was cut short as his ship broke apart under concentrated fire. Danny watched the destruction through failing eyes. The pain from his injuries was becoming distant. The edges of his vision were going dark. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a shuttle approaching his broken ship. He had bought enough time. Danny woke up in a room filled with soft blue light. The walls were smooth and curved, made from materials he did not recognize. Medical equipment hummed quietly around his bed. He tried to move and found that his injuries had been treated. His arm was no longer broken. The cuts on his face had healed completely. Medicine was far more advanced than human technology. He had been unconscious for 3 days while their doctors repaired his body. A door opened silently and walked in. She was no longer wearing simple gray clothing. Her robes were deep purple trimmed with silver, the colors of the imperial family. A delicate crown rested on her silver hair. She looked like a completely different person. But her eyes were the same, and when she saw that Danny was awake, those eyes filled with relief. She sat down beside his bed and told him everything that had happened. They had received his distress signal. They had arrived just in time to destroy his hunting party, had been taken aboard the flagship and reunited with her mother's representatives. The Empress had demanded her daughter's immediate return. She had expected to apologize for her escape attempt and submit to her duties. Instead, had done something no one expected. She had invoked the ancient law of life debt. Among if someone saved the life of a royal without knowing their true status and without expecting reward, the royal owed them an unpayable debt. This law was older than the empire itself. It had not been used in over 1,000 years because everyone assumed no one would ever save a royal stranger for nothing. Danny had done exactly that. He had rescued without knowing she was a princess. He had protected her without asking for payment. He had nearly died for her without any expectation of reward. The law was clear. The debt could only be repaid by granting the princess her freedom. The Empress could not force into the marriage without dishonoring the ancient traditions that supported her throne. Danny listened to all of this with quiet amazement. He said he had not known about any law. He had just wanted to help someone in trouble. Smiled sadly. She said that was exactly why the law worked. It was designed to reward genuine kindness, not calculated favor-seeking. If he had known about the law beforehand, his actions would not have counted. The door opened again. A tall male in military uniform entered the room. He introduced himself as commander, leader of the. He said he had questions for the human pilot. Asked why Danny had risked his life for a stranger. Danny gave him the same answer he had given. He said he heard a distress signal. Someone needed help, so he helped. Seemed dissatisfied with this answer. He pressed further. He asked what Danny had expected to gain: political influence, military protection, economic advantage. Danny said he had expected nothing. He had not even known was until after he rescued her. And once he knew, it did not change anything. A person in trouble was a person in trouble. Their species did not matter. Stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He bowed his head slightly in a gesture of respect. He said they had always believed humans were primitive and selfish. They had assumed human kindness was just another form of manipulation. But Danny's actions could not be explained by self-interest. He had nearly died for a stranger and asked for nothing in return. This information had been transmitted to the imperial court. The Empress herself had watched recordings of Danny's desperate battle against the ships. She had heard his final words too about some things mattering more than survival. The court scholars were now debating what this meant. Perhaps humans were not as simple as they had always believed. Perhaps there was something in human nature worth studying and understanding. Danny said he did not think he was special. Many humans would have done the same thing. Asked if he truly believed that. Danny thought about it honestly. Then he admitted that he did not know. He hoped it was true, but hope and truth were not always the same thing. 2 weeks later, Danny stood in the landing bay of the flagship. His ship, the Dusty Horizon, had been completely repaired. More than repaired. Engineers had upgraded every system. The old freighter now had better engines, stronger armor, and more advanced sensors than most military vessels. Danny had refused all other rewards. The Empress had offered him titles, lands, and wealth. He had turned down everything. He said he was just a cargo hauler. He did not need anything else. Came to see him off. She was dressed simply today, in clothing that reminded him of when they first met. She said she had decided to accept a position as diplomatic liaison to human space. She would be working to build understanding between their peoples. She said she wanted to learn more about humans, especially about the ones who helped strangers without expecting anything in return. Danny smiled. He said she was welcome on his ship anytime. He could teach her more card games. She laughed and said she would take him up on that offer. He climbed into his ship and powered up the upgraded engines. The Dusty Horizon lifted off and flew toward the stars. He set course for the same human colony he had been traveling to before all of this began. The medical supplies in his cargo bay were still waiting to be delivered. 3 hours into the journey, his sensors detected a faint signal. Danny leaned forward and listened. It was a distress beacon, coming from a small moon at the edge of his sensor range. The signal was in a language he did not recognize. He hesitated for only a moment, then he changed course. Behind him, space stretched endlessly in every direction. Somewhere among those stars, scholars were writing reports about human nature. Somewhere, an empress was reconsidering her assumptions about other species. Somewhere, a princess was preparing to bridge the gap between two civilizations. But Danny did not think about any of that. He thought only about the signal ahead. Someone needed help. And helping was simply what he did.